So in the third chapter, Karma Yoga is explained, means Jachnarta Karmanoyatra Lokayam Karma Bandhanam. One does all one's activities for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord as a sacrifice, or in other words, out of love for Krishna. That, but then Krishna specified more deeply in 330 of Bhagavad Gita that it means that one must act as a spirit soul. Spirit soul means one's real ego, one's real I, and not, one must stop acting as the body. Acting spiritually, Krishna explains, means nirasir nirmamo. Without thinking, I'm the enjoyer of the proprietor of everything. That, because everything belongs to Krishna and therefore is the enjoyer. But Arjuna says it's a problem, because he said that after Krishna had given some more detail, he said, yes, there are two obstacles of the path of devotional service, so the spiritual path, two obstacles. Paripantina, I say, two obstacles. Mara and Dvesha, he says, attachment and aversion. It's because we are attached to things in this world. We are developing enjoyment for things in this world. And by that, we are attached to what gives us enjoyment, and we don't want what gives us distress. But the distress and the enjoyment is not for the soul. The soul has nothing on it. It's for the body. But we identify with the temporary body. And that's the problem. This attachment and aversion, that's called duality. That good and bad. Things are good for the body, bad for the body, good for the mind, good for the bad for the mind, but we are not the body and the mind. And Arjuna says, yes, I understand these two obstacles. I understand, Krishna, that you say that you should not be attached to not killing Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev is my grandfather. He gave me everything. He was my father, because Pandu died, and he was raised practically by Bhishmadev and Vidura. How can I kill him? I'm too attached to him. I cannot kill him. Although he took the side of the criminals by providence, but I'm averse to that, Krishna. What causes this attachment to identify with the body and and everything that relates to the body? In so many lifetimes, we have got relatives, fathers, sons, daughters, so many. We were attached in these lives. But now we have everything forgotten. No attachment anymore. So it's very temporary, these things. And therefore, what is this enemy? What causes me to act according to these attachment and aversions? Arjuna says. That what forces me to act according to my attachment? I don't want it, but I'm forced by it. My mind does not want to do anything else. And that's the introduction to the last part of the third chapter we will discuss here, which is very important. Krishna says, yes, there is an enemy. and he calls it the arch enemy, the greatest enemy. That he says, Kama isha krodha icha ratchakuna smutma, masana mapatna, pityanam iavarinam. That so Lord Krishna says, it is kama, lust, Arjuna, that's the first enemy. And lust comes from the mode of passion. The mode of passion will be described further in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. This mode of passion is characterized by wanting to enjoy the body. And that's the idea of most people in this world. You live only once, just enjoy. But that's the foolishness. This means that one gives oneself over to the enemy. And if lust becomes unsatisfied, what happens? Anger comes. But Krishna had already explained that in the 2nd chapter. Dayato visyapum sansangas tesi bachayate sangas sanyate me kama kamko de bijayate. It says that people in this world meditate on things of this world. You see a new car, a new iPhone, you see, I want to eat this or that, all these adverts, the mind becomes so absorbed in it. Everyone has it, so I need also to have it. And one becomes attracted. One meditates on it, makes plans with their intelligence to get that enjoyment or that object. But then when you get it, first you have to pay a lot for it, usually. And then it doesn't give you enjoyment, what you want. And you become angry. So that's the greatest enemy. First, now Krishna will speak about the effects of this enemy on our consciousness, how devastating it is. We are the soul, not the body. When the body dies, the soul is still there, eternal. And we have consciousness. And if that consciousness is contaminated by lust, you will take birth again. And that's the problem. And you will never feel satisfied. So Vallabhdev Vidyabhushan says, it is lust and then anger arising from the mode of rajas. Know this as the great devourer, the great sinful one, the enemy. So Arjuna is a military man and he's hearing that word enemy. So anger and lust, how does that fit together? Next slide. There you have milk and yogurt. So when Baldev Vidyabhushan said, anger and lust, not different. It's the same thing. But if lust is not fulfilled, it turns into anger. Like you have milk and you add lemon acid, then it becomes cheese or yogurt or whatever. Then it transforms. So in essence, it's the same thing. Next slide. This is from Vishwanath Chakravarti. The lust appearing in different forms becomes visible as anger. This means that lust obstructed by someone transforms into anger. Lust arises from the mode of passion, and from lust in the mode of passion, arises anger in the mode of ignorance. So from this lust, other things come. That you get envy, pride, greed, that wanting honor, wanting distinction, honor and distinction, and wanting profit. That comes all from this lust. Next slide. Again, Vishwanath. But after the fulfillment of the desire should be finished. No, this lust is a great devourer. It is impossible to satisfy the expectations of desire. And that Krishna will explain further. Avitram jnanam etana jnanya nityavarana kamrupena kantya duspurana lenacha. Duspurana lenacha. It burns like fire. I must have it. That. And if you try to satisfy it, you only want more, 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 more. Someone asked a billionaire, what do you desire? He will say, I want more billions. That's just his desire. It never stops. Never satisfied. We want to, if we feel dissatisfied in heart, it goes to his lust. If you want to be satisfied in your life, first you must give up this lust. Then you will become happy. That's the teaching of Prahlad Maharaj, 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj said, if you want to become happy, stop trying to become happy in this world. And that's a very important point. Next slide. Here we have Hanuman. Both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. That's interesting. You can spiritualize it. Hanuman burned the city of Lanka, Ravan's city. That they somewhere or another Indrajit, when Hanuman jumped to Lanka, that Hanuman he had killed so many of these Rakshasas, these man-eaters. And then Indrajit, the son of Ravan, catched him. But Hanuman was thinking, it's good that they catch me. Then I can see the palace, I can see the city, and inform Ram. So he kept quiet. But then Ravan said, oh, you are an insignificant monkey, he said to Hanuman. We will burn your tail. And then you can jump in the streets of Lanka so that the children can laugh with you. So they wrapped his tail with cloth and some fuel, and they lighted it. And then Hanuman showed his power, and he came. He removed the cords that he was bound with, and he was jumping from one building to another in Lanka with his tail that was burning. But Mother Sita had prayed to the Agni, the sun, the fire god, please make, if his tail burns, give him the feeling that it's cold. And Hanuman did not feel the heat, but he was jumping from building to building and put the whole city on fire out of anger. So anger can be used sometimes in the service of Krishna. Like Arjuna also used anger. You cannot fight without anger. Kshatriyas are in a mode of passion. And they have great, and especially when Jayadratha killed Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna, he became very angry and he was fighting very fiercely the next day. He used it in the service of Krishna. Then lust, we use it in the service of Krishna. It becomes selfless. It becomes our friend instead of our enemy. It's not that you can use all your lusty desires in Krishna's service, but these are examples. They are nice examples. Next one, reflection. First question is, do I live in the mode of goodness? If we live in a mode of passion, we will be affected by lust. So we have to come to goodness. How do we come to goodness? Following the four relative principles. Don't eat meat, fish, eggs. No illicit sex especially. Forget about it completely. And then no gambling, no intoxication. Taking a bath every morning when you get up. Best also, take a shower at noontime before you take lunch. Be clean. In the morning, have a sadhana, chant Hare Krishna. Focus your mind on Krishna. Hear about Krishna. Worship Krishna in the morning, have a good sadhana. And that will protect you during the day against this lust. So can I use my anger and wrath in the service of Lord Krishna? Sometimes you can, sometimes not. What are the causes of my dissatisfaction? Look in our own heart. If you have that hankering for bodily relationships, it will be very difficult inside. Just, you have to give that up. Relationships with others can be spiritual. That's without attachment. That relationship with the body is on an animal platform. It causes lust. Then I will read 38 first. Dumena vricate vanir yatardaso malenacha. Yato benavrito garbas tatat enedam avritam. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as an embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. So here 3 examples are given. And you have the embryo is covered by the womb. That's a very deep covering. It's like, plants. Plants have consciousness, even intelligence, but it's very covered. A plant has intelligence. It will put its leaves in the direction of the sun. That's intelligence. But then you have the second example. It's like a mirror. It's covered by dust. If you look in a mirror, you cannot see yourself. It's like animal life. Animals, they cannot understand who they are. But then fire and smoke, that's the human form of life. We have intelligence. We can understand that we are not a body. We can purify ourselves after hearing this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. We can purify ourselves. So that's the responsibility. It's like we have to remove the smoke from the fire. Text 39 speaks about what does this lust do to our consciousness. Avitam jnana netina jnana nityavarana kamrupina kauntya duspranana lenacha. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by its eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So it means two things here that this lust does to us. It covers our spiritual intelligence. We are not able anymore to understand that we are not this body. And even if we understand, so-called, we continue acting as the body. It's a very deep illusion it brings us in. This identification of the body, it brings us in a cycle of action and reaction. I want to enjoy frustration, try again, and it's without end. That one is addicted to alcohol and one suffers because of it. But next day, the person, after being recovered, thinks, I want to do it again. It has no end. It's madness. This is an addiction of one who drinks alcohol, but you can have that same addiction in eating sweets, and enjoying this or that. So it makes us unsatisfied, and it covers our intelligence. So Baldev Vidyabhushan said, the knowledge of the jiva is covered by this constant enemy in the form of lust, which is like unsatisfied fire. Next slide. Baldev Vidyabhushan, just as it is impossible to satisfy a fire by offerings, Kam cannot be satisfied by enjoyment. You cannot dove a fire by putting butter or ghee on it. It will give more and more fire. It's not possible. Next one. There you have a man in the prison with a big chain. This big chain, this big ball is called Maituna Agara. It's the shackles of sex life. That's the greatest enemy, the greatest, the deepest form of lust. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus the material world is called Maitunya Agara, or shackles of sex life. The criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Lust is a symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within this material world. That is keeping you here. So the devotees have no sex life, only for procreation of children. That's all. Otherwise, they are living as celibates. And there is no exceptions in that. That if that rule is broken, you break the four regulative principles. No chance to make spiritual advancement. You are shackled by this big ball. Lust is a symbol of ignorance, by which a living entity is kept within this material world. But we have unshackled. Next are shackles. Do I want to remove the shackles of sex life that keeps me in ignorance? That's the first thing. If you don't want it, it will not happen. Although we are covered by it, you must want it. That. Then 340. I'll read the text, 340. Indriyane manobudir asyadistam uchate eter vimayatye sarkyanam avita deiman. Because we have on the screen a translation of Aladev Vidya Bhushan. So Arjuna has heard, lust is the arch enemy. As a military man, he thinks, where is this enemy, Krishna? I want to know where the enemy is. And now I can kill this enemy. So Krishna replies, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the seeds of this lust. By this lust covering the knowledge of the soul, it bewilders the soul. So you have, it's in the senses, the hands want to touch, the ears to hear, the nose to smell, the tongue to taste, but to speak about the genitals, that these are full of lust. Also the mind. The mind is the steering wheel of the senses. And the senses give their signals to the mind, and the senses say, we want to enjoy. And the mind says, yes, let's do it, it feels good. Because there's lust in the mind. And the lust is so strong, it's also in the intelligence. Then the mind uses the intelligence, or orders the intelligence, you make plans, so that we can satisfy this lust. Where will we get the money? How can I seduce that girl? Make plans. And the intelligence comes from the control of the mind. And the mind is dictated by the senses. And that's the situation of the people in this world. They become godas. They become servants of their senses and their mind. That's all. That we have the choice. You become the servant of your own mind and intelligence and the senses, or you become the servant of Krishna and get free from it. Next slide. Bewilderment means that lust makes the jiva disinclined to know the Atma and inclined to enjoy sense objects. Because this lust makes you identify with the body and the mind and the whole world. And that's my world, and that's my world of happiness. It's a big illusion. Next slide. Vishwanath Chakravarti says, and the sense objects starting with sound are the provinces ruled by the king called lust. Lust bewilders the jiva by covering knowledge using senses, mind, and intelligence. So this lust covers our knowledge, makes us identify with the body and the mind, and the lust uses our intelligence, our mind, our senses to get its purpose. So, Srila Prabhupada speaks, compares it with addiction. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego. False ego, we remember two things. I'm mine. I'm the enjoyer and this is mine. And that's the illusion. It influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter. And thus with the mind and the senses. We start to identify with the cinema of the mind and take it very, very serious. I feel bad. Oh, that happened. Oh, oh, it's because seminar-ch3part7, yes, nice. It's the mind that brings all these feelings and we identify with it. So your happiness depends then on the mind and the senses. But that's disastrous in this world. You never get what you want. Always frustration and unhappiness. So we are not the doer. But lust makes us thinking we are the doer. Everything depends on us. I will become happy. I have to achieve so many things. What's the reality? What will you achieve? We will die soon, that's all. That's what we are going to achieve. Nothing to achieve. It's all finished. But the mind brings up this illusion. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this for true happiness. We think lust is love. But love, real love, means pleasing the beloved without asking something in return. Lust means, let's see what there is in there for me. That's quite different. Next, reflection. What awareness do I have of the enemy of lust sitting in my own mind, intelligence, and senses? How do I know? This verse of Bhagavad Gita explains how you can. You feel unsatisfied. You hanker for so many things. That's our enemy. Next slide. Now Arjuna wants to know, how can I conquer this enemy? I want that out of my system. I want to get that out of my body, mind, senses, out of my intelligence. And here, Lord Krishna replies, this is a translation by Baladev Vidyabhushan. Therefore, in the beginning, regulating the senses by Nishkarma Yoga, or best of the Bharatas, or best of the Bharata lineage, kill this demon which destroys scriptural knowledge realization of the Atma. So this demon of lust we have to kill by following the directions of the scriptures. And the scripture says you have to regulate. What does it mean to regulate the intelligence, mind, and senses? It begins with regulating the senses. Regulation. Krishna will speak about that also in the 6th chapter. Don't eat too much, not too less. Don't sleep too much, not too less. That have also, don't work always. Have also recreation. Recreation in Krishna consciousness, but it's not a time for enjoyment. A devotee who is absorbed in Krishna consciousness and engaged in devotional service, his creation is his service. He does not need recreation. But if we are not on that level, yes. So you have the regulating the senses means also, and that will be explained in the next verses, that you first must know that we have senses. I'm sure we all know. And these senses, they must be steered or controlled by the mind. The mind is part of our subtle body. Thinking, feeling, willing. And that the mind must control the senses. But the mind must control the senses under the direction of the intelligence. And that's important. We must work always under the direction of our intelligence. And Krishna says this intelligence must be spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence means how to act as a spirit soul. And that spiritual intelligence, where do we find it? Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita. It's called transcendental knowledge. How to act as a spirit soul. Therefore, we must first hear how to act as a spirit soul. And then the soul gets faith and will direct the intelligence. Yes, act as a spirit soul. But the soul cannot direct the intelligence if we are overwhelmed by lust. Because then we have forgotten we are the consciousness, the soul in this body. We identify with the body. So next verse. So when love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. One can become Krishna conscious and turn lust into love of God. So that process that is explained here in the next verses and in Bhagavad Gita. How to turn this lust into real love again. The first knowledge is, who am I? What prevents me to assimilate scriptural knowledge and realize my position as an Atma, as an eternal servant of Krishna? It is this lust. So next verse, I first read 42. These are the two last verses and very important verses. Indriyani pranyaur indriyabhya pranmana mansastu prabhudir yobhute prasastusa. So Krishna says first you have to understand how higher than dull matter are the senses, the eyes, the hands, and so on. And higher than the senses is the mind. The mind must control, direct the senses. It's more subtle. And more subtle and more powerful is the intelligence. The intelligence must direct the mind. And more subtle than the intelligence is the eternal spirit soul, which must direct the intelligence. Without that knowledge, we cannot control our senses. And without that knowledge, we cannot direct the intelligence to act spiritually. Most people identify with the mind, even great psychologists. But you are not the mind. If you are the mind, you can't control your mind. Because what is going to control your mind? Intelligence must control your mind. And that must be directed by the soul. So, text 43, and that's the last verse. Evam buddhe prambhutva samstatyatmanamatmana yaishatrumabhu kama rupam darasadam. Thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should study the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So what's the solution? The intelligence must acquire transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge, how to act spiritually. And then with that intelligence, it should direct the mind and senses to be engaged spiritually, to be engaged in the service of Krishna, and not in the business of lust. So, but it requires, like we see on the slide, you have to realize first you are the soul. And that we have a subtle body. And the consciousness coming from our soul is pervading this subtle body. But if that consciousness is contaminated with lust, that's problematic. Now we have to remove the lust from our consciousness. Otherwise we take birth again. If the lust is removed from our consciousness, we have attained liberation. That's attaining liberation. So Baladev Vidyabhushan says, thus realizing that the soul is distinct from the intelligence, fixing the mind in the soul by the fixed intelligence, destroy the enemy in the form of lust, which is difficult to conquer, O mighty armed Arjuna. So the soul is different from the intelligence. In the material world, it's like that. If we become realized, self-realized, then the thinking, feeling, willing will be done again by the soul. When we develop our spirit, when our spiritual body becomes manifest. But when we are in this material world, it's different. Because we have material intelligence, material and material mind, which is covered by lust. But if they become spiritualized, then the soul regains its ability to think and to discriminate on the spiritual platform. And that's called Shiva Mukta, the liberated position. Next verse. 343. When the soul is firm, then it controls the senses, mind, intelligence, and lust. So when the soul has faith in Krishna and in transcendental knowledge, it directs the intelligence. Yes, you act. You instruct the mind and senses to act according to Krishna's instructions. On the basis of transcendental knowledge. So what we need to act spiritually is first transcendental knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge to act as a soul, you cannot act as a soul. You're absorbed in the mind and identify with the feelings in the mind and so on. So now, next, this is Srila Prabhupada. Desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Last sentence, last slide. Can you be happy if you are bitten by the snake of lust and your mind and senses are uncontrolled? You become the servant of uncontrolled senses. You will become the servant of anger, greed, envy, and you become mad. And that's the situation of most people in the world, in this world, yeah. More or less mad, Srila Prabhupada, all of them. Unless their consciousness become purified from this lust. So thank you very much. Any question? This is very important knowledge that that should change the way we live this knowledge. And we will learn in the next session how to do that. Yes?
What are some practical examples engaging rough in business service different than to set lamp on fire?
Well,
Nowadays,
well, Srila Prabhupada was in Amsterdam, and they were going to install Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. But their preparations for the installation were completely inappropriate. They didn't do it. And the television was there. And they were filming Prabhupada. Till Prabhupada became angry and chastised them like anything. Just, he didn't care for the camera. He was chastising them, like very angry. That they never seen Prabhupada so angry. That, but it was his duty to correct the disciples. He was so angry, and one of the hippies came to him and said, he said, your solution for everything is chanting Hare Krishna. Why don't you chant Hare Krishna? Because I was so angry. And Srila Prabhupada followed these instructions. He took his bead bag and started to chant Hare Krishna. But then after the performance, when everything was over, Srila Prabhupada was sitting in a rocking chair. Like nothing happened. That completely peaceful. So he was not controlled by this anger. He was using the anger in Krishna's service. Another example was in Mayapur. We had just built the Lotus building and Prabhupada's quarters. And Prabhupada was making a walk. In that time already we had security guard. And the Bengali security guard had to be at certain points at certain times. And when Srila Prabhupada came back, and he came before his door of his room, it was just the time that the guard had to be before his room, and he was not there. And Srila Prabhupada said, get me this guard. And Navayogendra Prabhu at that time, later Swami, he was in the room with Prabhupada. And when this Bengali guard this Bengali guard came in, Srila Prabhupada, angry, started to shout in Bengali, very angry. And Navayogendra Maharaj said, I was just standing beside him, and I was trembling out of fear. That, but then when he was outside, the guard, Srila Prabhupada became again very peaceful. One moment or another, like nothing happened. It's same thing. It's not controlled by anger. It's using anger. These are examples of Prabhupada, how to use anger in the service of Krishna. Arjuna also used anger. But like I said, it's not always possible. But it's also said in Nectar of Devotion, one can use anger to react to those who are blaspheming devotees, or to defend them. That's also another use. Yeah, but One was discriminated. Thank you. Something else? Good. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.